Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. I'm so excited to have you here. I first want to say if you are someone who is new to listening to Ambitious and maybe this is your first episode you've pressed play on, I want to say welcome. We are so excited to have you part of the Ambitious family. And also, if you are one of our OG listeners and you know who you are, those who tune in every single week to our solo, our guest episodes, and really are the OG Ambitious family. I also want to say hello and thank you so much for listening every single week because this podcast would not be what it is without you. So, today I'm going to be talking about what to do in the event that a team member or someone that you've hired you feel like is not working out. And I want to give you a little context as to why this kind of came as an inspiration or why it was something that I was really passionate and frankly excited to talk about because I had genuinely, in a matter of like 2 weeks, 3 to 4 people each week who were like, this team member, whoever that person might have been, is not working out. And because of that, I'm thinking about letting them go. And in every situation, I was like, whoa, 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 hold the phone. Let's just take a breath. I have questions before you just fire somebody off of your team. I can tell you out of all 8 conversations or 10 conversations that I had, of those, 10% of the people that came to me actually ended up removing a team member. And so when I started to sit back and think about how many people's jobs could have been impacted, and most importantly, for the CEO, how many businesses could have been impacted that didn't need to be changed, that didn't need to have problems, it really became super apparent to me how many people don't really know how to distinguish whether a team member not working out is really an issue with them, i.e., the CEO. Is it an issue with the team member and them really just not holding their weight? And in an event where we feel like there is conflict, whatever it may be, or there's expectations that are not being met, what do we do about that? So, how do we handle it? How do we really know how to break a situation down to know what the right next step is? And many people come to me in coaching because I coach quite a lot of people who have teams, or I also coach people who, potentially are growing their team and are looking to really get insight on like, I don't know what to do here, but I just feel like this team member is not working right now. Like there's something about the way that they've been operating, it's just not working out. So, for the context of the team member today, by the way, I also want to say that this is not just going to apply to full time employees. So, if you are somebody who maybe has contractors working inside of your business, that is also something that will be underneath today's umbrella of today's conversation. But if there's one thing that I've learned a lot about business over the last several years, it actually is around team because I've realized that, you know, first of all, the lid of any business is the lid of its leader. And what that means is that the first thing I'm going to need you to do before you continue to listen to today's episode is to be open minded and to recognize that any successful business has a correlation to the leader, and also any not successful situation happening in a business, i.e., no successful sales, no successful marketing, no successful team member is also a reflection of its leader. And I know that you might be in your head because I know how many of these conversations I've had with people who say to me, no, no, Kate, you don't understand. I had a conversation with this person and I trained them this way and I did this with them. I'm going to need you to like physically think about yourself putting a hat on. And I want you to physically like picture yourself putting a hat on today of curiosity and seeking to understand. Because when you're a CEO of a business, it is your responsibility to understand your role when things are working and also when they're not working. And today is an invitation for you to do that. So I am not going to tell you that you're the problem only in this situation because you might be thinking, I'm not the problem, it's my team member. There is definitely equal parts on either side, but what I'm going to need you to do is to go into today's episode open-minded as to curiosity. That's what I want you to do. Put on the hat of curiosity today. And by the end of today's episode, I can assure you that you will know what to do with this team member. If you are somebody who's like, well, I don't have a team member right now that's not quite working out, but I feel like this is something I want to learn. If you are not in a place where you have to make a decision, this is the best time to listen to today's episode because that is going to empower you with understanding things that you can also do in a preventative nature to keep yourself from getting to a place where you need to make a decision of, do I let them go or do we continue? So how do we get to this place where the team member is on our team and they're not working out and we feel like we're at a place where we're potentially thinking about letting them go? First thing that I will say that I see in almost every single business I've gone into is that people really lack documentation. And so many people are either they have really, really robust documentation where it's like the SOPs that you've got in your business and you've got this like encyclopedia of instructions for somebody, but it's so meaty and it's so lengthy that it's extremely difficult to get through. Or you might be part of bucket number two, which is the person who basically has no documentation. And what the issue with this is if you let someone go on your team and you don't have, number one, proper documentation of how to actually train them, but then second, documentation of their performance, it actually, in some areas of the world, is literally illegal to let someone go if you don't have documentation of whatever the issue may be on an ongoing basis, i.e., say someone is doing something in your business and they work in marketing and they're not doing their marketing job effectively, you usually want to have documentation of calls you've had together that you've voiced concern and given feedback of needing to have a change, milestones of achievement, like we're going to get into today. Documentation is essential when you're looking to either train someone to be successful on your team or to ultimately, even if you're thinking about letting them go, to back up the justification or the decision of letting them go. But the reason we even end up in a place where somebody can get someone on their team where they're finding that they just are not covering their bases is oftentimes due to just lack of documentation. You don't necessarily, and you can have a very real and honest conversation with yourself right now, do you actually have effective, detailed outlines of your principles in your business? Did you bring someone through a training program when they got onboarded? Did you outline what are the values of the company and the decision-making guidelines from which you operate? Did you outline, how to audit something to know that it's complete or finished? Did you have anything resource-wise that when this happens, this is what we do about it? If you don't have any of those things created, what it tells me is that you don't actually have any basis from which your team is being trained. So instead, what happens is you end up just being like, well, they shadowed me. They're on calls with me all the time. They're around me all the time. They should just know. And one of the mistakes that I see all the time is that people are assuming, there's a lot of assumptions that's happening. You're assuming that the person that you're trying to communicate training to is just getting it. You say it, they get it, they do it. There's this belief that they should just know after being in your ecosystem for long enough. What we know, though, is that people need documentation. And I will also share a stat with you as to why this is important, because 80% of wrongful termination lawsuits were actually due to a lack of proper documentation in the individual's training or in the documentation of their offboarding. 80% of wrongful termination lawsuits that happen are because the company that that person worked for didn't have adequate documentation. So documentation of your business, what you do day in, day out, what you do, in each area of your business needs to be noted somewhere. So what we do is, and I, even as I say this, maybe I should be making this another episode. So if you guys feel like you would love to learn how to document your business, I can do a training absolutely on the podcast about that. So you just shoot me a message, let me know. That would be helpful for you. But I will say what we teach our clients is we literally help them to take any process in their business and using different stages and filtering systems, as well as pairing it with AI, we help them to be able to document all their core processes. Because what I found was there were so many people who were having issues with their team members, but as soon as I said, show me their training, they were like, well, like it's kind of like informal. I said, okay, here we go. As in, we don't really have training. So if we don't have training for the individual, how can we be expecting them to follow the guidelines that are not even necessarily outlined anywhere? So Documentation is essential. That's how we end up in a place where people are not meeting our standards, is because the standards are not actually stated anywhere, they're not voiced anywhere, and they're not reinforced. The second way that we end up getting into this place is really in acting on emotion. Oftentimes when someone comes to me and they find that a team member is not working out, or the team member is like they're at like their wits end and they're like, I just can't anymore with this team member. Oftentimes when we get to that place, it's actually from a place of frustration, tons of emotion coming up, and frankly, just like this resentment that's happened over time. They'll say things like, I feel like I've talked to this person 5 times about this, or I feel like by now they should just know. And what actually ends up happening is that there's a lot of frustration and a lot of resistance in the CEO or the person who's running the business, and they bring that emotion to the table. And so what ends up happening because of that is you are going to create a massive domino in your business. I want any person that I work with as a CEO, when they let someone go on their team, to be completely not neutral to the point where they're not going to miss that person, not neutral to the fact that they don't care about letting them go. That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about you're not bringing in built up resentment into that meeting. Well, you should have done this, and this is what we were looking for. And we talked about this endless amount of times. We are looking in anytime we want to let somebody out of a business, or we feel that we want to move on from a relationship with someone in our business, we want to feel like we have data and we want to feel like we have the information we need to feel good about parting ways. We want to feel like we remove, and you guys hear me talk about this all the time. There's a great quote passed along to me from a mentor. It's all data, no drama. You just need to say, listen, there was this deadline, it wasn't hit. So because of that, here's where we are. We had this instance where you were behind or had to have 6 revisions of feedback when typically we only allocate 2. And in being with the company for 3 years or 4 years, this is not something that we can continue to move forward with. That's the kind of conversation that we need to be having. Again, you'll realize this goes back to having documentation of not only what you're doing in your business, but also things along the way as they progress. And it's also asking you as the CEO to say, listen, I get you're frustrated. I get that you might be at your wits' end with somebody on your team, or you might be feeling like by now things should be easier, flow more, be simpler to operate in. But I also want to share that 60% of managers, this is a Harvard Business Review stat. The Harvard Business Review stat showed that 60% of managers report hiring and firing decisions oftentimes happening in the heat of the moment without considering the actual data or information as factors for their decision. Okay, 60%. 60% of managers have actively voiced in this study that they have hired and fired people strictly in the heat of the moment. And so we want to look at this. Obviously, it's an astounding stat of 60%. So what it tells us is our emotions are playing more of a role in this oftentimes than we even maybe want to actively acknowledge, which is why things like we talk about of self-regulation and emotional regulation are so important, because if we're not regulated, we can't always necessarily decipher between what is emotion and frustration of pent up energy and what is actual facts that this person is not a good asset to the team. And so what I try to do with people is help them when they bring something like this to me and they feel like a team member's not working out. What I try to do is help them to distinguish what their frustrations are, what their emotions are, what their resistances are, and then look at, but what do the facts tell us? And so that's something I will see a lot, is that people will be so upset, so frustrated with a team member that they're like, oh, I so and so has to go. And I want to invite you to think about, okay, I know how you're obviously emotionally feeling right now. However, what I want to see is there information or data to back up the drama or what you're feeling in this current moment? Again, back to data versus drama. The other thing that I also see is that people are not giving their team members intentional, I use that word specifically, intentional feedback. I talked to several business owners during the span of when people were bringing these team issues to me, and they had said to me, "Well, this person, I've given them so much feedback," and I was like, "Okay, well." the feedback that you're giving, have you seen improvement from the feedback? And they were like, well, no, but like, I just have been giving tons of feedback. Like I'm always telling them, that what they need to change, what they need to change. So first, I want to say that I want to look at whether they're doing positive and negative feedback or just what the person's doing wrong. That's one thing we want to acknowledge. But the thing is, kind of back to our documentation, your feedback cannot just be, oh, good job. It needs to be good job on what you did in blank, because here's what worked really well about it that helps us with XYZ, our framework. Documentation, which was the first one that we noted today, is important because without documentation, you're giving feedback with no basis for it. So I want to give you an example. If I am a fitness trainer and you're squatting and I just say good squat, right? Like, so I'm your trainer, you're doing a workout, you decide to squat, you come back up and I say, oh, that's amazing. Great squat. What's our first curiosity as we hear that? Well, why was it a good squat? Did I go low enough? Were my knees wide enough? Did my stance look okay? Was my back in the right way? Did I do it at the right tempo? Like, what about it was good? So what I see is people who are giving feedback to people are often doing so in a very blanket, generalized way that doesn't reinforce the initial training they had. So because of that, the person's just like, okay, I guess it was a good squat, and they don't really know why. So feedback without it being connected to any of your training, or feedback that's not connected to a why, is basically feedback that falls flat. It doesn't really download for anyone because it doesn't latch on to anything. And so one of the things that I see is either that people give non-structured feedback, so it doesn't really have any intention, any root, or any why to it, or they genuinely just don't give enough feedback. They will not give enough praise and they won't give enough acknowledgement. And they also don't give enough feedback on where the person could refine or do better for them to continue to improve. And there was literally a stat that showed in a Gallup study that 43% of employees say that they don't get enough feedback to be able to increase their performance at their job. 43%. 43% of employees have noted that they don't get enough feedback to even do their job better. So this is an invitation for you to also say, like, have I actually given this person, number one, consistent feedback? But then number two, have you given that feedback in a way that is structured around what the training covered and how that person's really doing a good job of integrating the training? Or have you given the feedback in a lens that really impacts what they did and either why it was really impactful in a good way, or why it is a negative domino in the business if it should continue, or what it would impact? So when it comes to feedback, is a key thing that I see, because if we don't give either enough feedback or the right kind of feedback, we're really missing the mark on even having the potential to help somebody to grow. And back to what I said about documentation and training is also looking at, do you even have training? And I'm going to be really honest. I I had hired somebody recently to work with us who's absolutely amazing. And she came into the business at a time where there was a lot of things that were changing. And I didn't have my formal typical training that I would want to have for somebody like that I would envision. And so I thought, okay, well, how do I make sure that she gets really good training and like gets like a good understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it and all of our principles if I don't have it built into my portal specific to her role? And so what I decided to do is I basically, to ensure that she got the training she needed, even though I didn't have it fully all prepped out, we blocked off 1 week at a co-work space and I had her meet me there. And I took that week to basically teach her every principle and framework that she was going to be using. And then had part of that also be integration time, which is where I would give her scenarios and she would kind of plan those out and outline them. And so it was interesting because her and I had a conversation, and I remember saying in passing to her, I'm really so sorry that your training wasn't more formal. And she said, Kate, that was all the small businesses that I've worked with, that was the most structured training that I've had in comparison to what I had elsewhere. And obviously for me, that was shocking because I wish I could have made it 10 times even more better for her than it was. But what it also symbolized to me was that, similar to what I see in business consulting and in business coaching of other businesses, agencies, coaching businesses, consulting businesses, in-person services, all of it, there is just this lack of training. There's kind of this, sink or swim. They come into the business and they start to work in the business, and you're just kind of like 3, 2, 1, go. And it's not to say that the 3, 2, 1, go is bad, because you as a growing business are going to need to hire quickly. You're going to need to bring people in fast. And you may not always have adequate time to make this perfectly outlined training per person. But even kind of to my example, that doesn't mean we just don't make training and Shadow Me is their only training. You can also find ways to get creative to give the person the resources that they need, even if it's not in some formal data bank just yet. And so for me, one of the things that I really look at is anytime someone wants to let someone on their team go, I really grill them on the onboarding of that person. I said, show me what their onboarding training was. I'm like, well, we got on some calls. I'm like, great, show me the recordings. Did you teach them a framework? Did you teach them steps? Did you give them like a ClickUp space that they're supposed to manage their job from? Did you give them trainings on how to use ClickUp? Like, does this person even have the toolbox to succeed? Or are you mad that they're not building anything when they literally don't have a hammer? Like, that's really what we're at. And this is the reason you'll probably notice from my tone today, I'm very passionate about this topic. And the reason I'm passionate about it is because we as CEOs need to realize that our lack of management and our lack of integration of some of the things we're talking about today is the difference of whether some people have a job or not. Some people can pay their bills or not. Some people can continue within our business. And this, again, is not to say that we're not going to potentially still end up letting this person go. But what I'm hoping is, as we're talking about this today, you're checking in with yourself and saying, okay, I'm eating a piece of humble pie over here, because I'm realizing I don't have very good onboarding and I don't have very good training. And it is very clunky and very complicated and not easy to understand. So maybe that's why people are not easily able to follow it. This is just an invitation for us to have an awareness. And so when it comes to training, it's interesting because about 70% of employees, in actually a LinkedIn learning study that just came out, was that 70% of employees say that they don't have the skills that they need to actually effectively do their current job, and ultimately suggested that it was due to gaps in training as well as their onboarding. 70%. So again, I'm saying this in the sense of showing you that if you are feeling a little bit called out or a little bit tickled today, that's the point. And that I also wanted to share the 70% because it tells you that you're not alone. But what we know is, as ambitious women, which is why we're all here, is that we're not looking to be the masses. We are not looking to have all the team members that are being fired because of emotion. We are not looking to be the team where people are coming in and they have no training and no onboarding. We are not looking to be part of the typical business. We are looking to be part of that 1 to 3% of how people operate at the highest level. So I'm inviting this to be an opportunity for us to consider some elements we need to create. And the other thing that I also asked someone is, I said, okay, well, this person you're thinking about firing, you've told me all the reasons they're not good at their job. What about them as a person? And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, the value they bring to your business. Are they a hard worker? Are they open-minded? Are they a good collaborator of ideas? Are they somebody who is persistent? Are they somebody who goes above and beyond? Are they somebody who has qualities outside of this tactical one issue that you have with them, which typically is rooted in emotion or typically rooted in lack of training and feedback? And when I asked that question, someone said, well, she's great. Yeah, she's great. Her personality is great. She's a great person. She this, she that. But, and they go on to something else. And so what then I then ask is, if she could do her job effectively in the aspect of what you're looking for, would you be okay with her personality and the other cultural aspects that she brings to the team? And someone said, oh, yeah, well, if she did her job properly, her personality and all that stuff is amazing. Like, she's a great asset to the team. I said, great. Now we look at the training and onboarding, because I see people who have let go of team members who were incredible assets to the team, strictly, frankly, based off of something that was a technicality that they didn't even have proper documentation, training, or feedback for. And they want to let this person go even though that person, as a value of their business, for how much they support the business, the ideas they have, the things they contribute, they want to let this person go just off those little pieces alone when they could have literally lost the biggest asset sitting right underneath their nose. And so the thing I explain to clients is we can train a lot around skills. Like many, many, many skills can be trained. You can't train someone to care about their job. You can't train somebody to go above and beyond. You can't train somebody to be empathetic. You can't train somebody to be driven. It's an innate value. It's an innate perspective, belief, operating system, if you will, that that person has. And so for me, what I ask myself is, okay, well, say I'm dissatisfied with something that someone's doing, I look at the values that they have and saying, am I having an issue with the tactical thing or the strategic thing that they're doing inside their job? Or do I have actually more of an issue with their values that they align with? Are they not a hard worker, or they don't communicate well, or they're not consistent? Those are larger issues for me than the tactical training piece, because what I found in my own team, as well as other teams that I train and that I work inside of, is that I have found that those pieces are often due to a lot of ownership on the company itself. There's things that, if someone's not doing their job properly, oftentimes need to be refined inside the actual business. Whereas if there's a value discrepancy, i.e., if your values don't align, that's a little bit different, because that, again, is something that's very difficult to teach somebody, if especially they don't desire to want to embrace those values that you and your company possess. So I wanted to kind of go through some common mistakes, because I wanted to first acknowledge that we didn't get here, i.e., considering thinking about letting a team member go by accident. This is something that has happened over time, 9 times out of 10, that I want to kind of give us a pulse check first. Ask ourselves some of those tough questions. And those, honestly, are the questions that I would ask you if you were my client. If you were my client, I would ask you those exact same questions, because I would want to know that you are not letting someone go within your business or within their role strictly just based off of you feeling heated about one specific mistake or situation that happened. So now comes, well, what do we do about it, right? So if we have this awareness, we know this person is not necessarily working out, and we're trying to kind of analyze the situation, what do we do about it? So first, massive, massive radical ownership. Step one is you have to take responsibility as the leader of the company, and you have to take responsibility as the leader of the situation. You have to ask yourself, what role did you play in this team member, and how things progress with them? Because one of the things that I don't exactly know word for word what it was, but it was a quote by Gary Vee, and he was talking about the fact that you cannot be upset with a manager because you hired the manager. The manager can't be upset with the staff member that they have underneath them, because they actually were the one who hired, managed, and trained that staff. So this idea of pointing fingers needs to be immediately off the table, because you might be thinking in your body, but Kate, and you start to think of all these things of but this, but that. I will tell you right now, that voice in you that's wanting to point fingers and to frankly place blame is part of the reason your business is not going to be successful. Every single business owner that I work with who has a massive business that is very aligned, great values, amazing team, very successful, is a leader and a CEO who takes radical ownership on not just the wins, but also the losses, i.e., the feedback that something you've done thus far has obviously not worked to the way that it needs to, because if it did, your team member would be succeeding most likely. So, what we want to look at is, where was our role? Where did we play within this? Where was our responsibility within it? And what role did I play in this situation? Did I communicate the expectations fairly? Did I have proper training? Did I manage their performance and help them to understand milestones of their progress? Did I talk to them enough? Or did I just say, here's your stuff, like, go do your job, right? Or they should just know, like, we don't need to constantly be talking about things all the time. Like, did I really support in the way that I needed to have that person win? And this is an opportunity for you to reflect. And it really is a way for you to say, are you really giving people on your team the resources that they need to be successful underneath your company? And it's what we consider to be the mirror test. Because anyone who's having an issue with a team or with a team member has to be able to, if you are going to grill that person and you work with me, you got to grill yourself first. You should always be first on the chopping block in any situation because you take radical ownership. So anytime that someone comes to me about a team member, the first question I'm going to ask you about is yourself. What did you do to lead this person well? Where do you think you could have led them better? What kind of training did they have? What training do you feel like they didn't have, but they probably could have afforded to have that would have supported them? What kind of support did you give along the way? Did you give milestones of progress? Did you give them feedback on where they could refine? These are opportunities for us to reflect. It has to, and in no instance will ever not start with us. It starts with us taking radical ownership. Okay. Second, is to take a step back and to pause and allow this to be an opportunity for you to not use emotional reasoning or emotional reaction to be the reason that you let someone on your team go who could be one of the biggest assets you have. I just had a call with someone who is restructuring their business, and we were talking with their team because they were going to be letting some of their team go as part of their restructuring. And I started to go through each person and they were like, "Oh, well, like so and so this or so and so that. I think they got to go for the following reasons." And I said to them, that's how your emotion feels. Tell me factually, give me information about them. Why do you want to keep them? Like, why specifically, other than I like them or I don't like them? Why do you want to keep them? And when we actually started unpacking it, the person she thought she was going to let go ended up not being the person she let go based off asking these critical questions. So I mention this because when we don't take that pause, it can impact the decision you make. And most importantly, it can impact your team. Because if you have other team members who are seeing you make emotional based decisions, think about how they feel about their job. Think about how they feel about how they're going to be considered come time for them to potentially either continue on your team or to not continue or be evaluated. They want to know that you as a leader are not somebody who just has an emotion and gets, upset about something and takes an action. They want to know that you are critically thinking through the steps that you're executing or the decisions that you're making, and you're thinking those through to make an intentional next step or decision. So you want to look at things like, okay, well, what would be the long term impact to our business if I let this person go? You also want to say, this issue that I'm having an issue with, right? So like if I'm looking at a team member, the thing that I'm struggling with when it comes to this team member, is this an ongoing problem or is this kind of a temporary problem that you're having? Could you see this problem going away? Is this a short term or a short timeline based situation? Or is this something that has been an ongoing issue from the day you met the person or for the last 2 years you've been explaining the same thing, right? And again, even if this is why it's important for us to have this conversation, even if it's been 2 years, my question becomes, in those 2 years, did you provide good training, feedback, milestones of progress, and check ins along the way? Because just the fact that it's been 2 years, but you didn't do any of those things in between makes those 2 years not valid and not a real reason to let that person go. And so, if you are somebody who lets someone go out of emotion and you let someone go out of just like this heightened, like, oh, this is frustrating me, that will hurt your team morale. It will hurt the team environment. And you have to also think about, how will this disrupt the business, right? So if it's just like 3, 2, 1, this person goes, how does the loss of that person impact the business? And if you say to me, well, Kate, the loss of that person doesn't impact the business, that tells me something else, because every team member on your team should be a loss. It's not to say you can't replace that person, but if letting someone on your team go makes no waves at all within the business, even on a micro or a macro scale, it means that the person that was there wasn't really solving a big problem. Because if the person is solving a big problem, you're going to have a big imprint on that person being gone. So it's, again, not to say you can't replace them, but it's to say that they added a lot of value, because with the thought of removing them, you feel like you are truly losing something by losing that individual. Hi, we are briefly interrupting today's episode. And no, I am not here to sell you anything. I am actually here to let you know about something that is really exciting and entirely free to support you. In the next week, we are going to be launching our Ambitious Network. This is a new community that I have created that is designed to be a place for you to be able to get all of the things that you're loving about the Ambitious podcast and so much more for yourself as a person, but also professionally for your business. So, in this network that we're going to be launching in 1 week, we're going to be allowing you to really connect yourself with like minded individuals and women who are also going for big things in every area of their life. So, what can you expect inside? Inside, I am doing things like live hot seat coaching on Zoom, me and you diving into your business. We're going to have exclusive giveaways that are only going to be available inside of this community. We have trainings and resources and different types of things that you can dive into that will help you to level up in your business. We have guest expert resources where I have my peers and my network who have provided things that will only be available inside this community. And of course, you're going to have the ability to also be surrounded with other people like yourself to share wins, to chat about business, and to talk about different things that are working or not working in today's current market. And most importantly, you'll have the ability to ask questions to me, to be able to get feedback from me and support from me when it comes to you and your business. So, listen, this is not a membership that is a graveyard of resources that I don't know what to do with. This is also not a free Facebook group where you end up joining and you kind of sit with all these notifications coming in, but you're not really getting anything out of it. This is really where a high level networking community meets the place of coaching and development all wrapped into one. And so, if you are someone who loves the Ambitious podcast, you are not going to want to miss out on the opportunity to join. And as part of our exciting launch, we are going to be doing something that is one of our biggest giveaways yet. I do this giveaway once a year, and it is actually a giveaway of probably the equivalent of about $50,000 to $60,000 worth of coaching. So you're not going to want to miss it. Stay tuned to our socials next week where you can get all the instructions on how to enter. And all that being said, let's get back into today's episode. So, step 3, I want you to, again, so just kind of summarize. Step 1, I want you to take massive responsibility and I want you to reflect on yourself first before anything about the team member. Second, I want you to take a pause and get emotionally regulated. I want you to step back and say, okay, emotions aside, what are we looking at here? And ask yourself some of those critical questions. Step 3 is you need to look at this person and ask yourself the questions of what do they bring to the business, to the team, to the culture outside of their role and just the tactics of what they do. Do they have a strong work ethic? Do they over deliver? Are they willing to collaborate with the team? I will say there actually is such a thing as people who are personality hires. And here's what I mean by that. You can have someone on your team who is not considered the most like badass, go getter, just kicking ass and taking names type of person when it comes to their role. And yet their presence, even though they don't have all the technical skills of something that you would want of like the highest person, the person that they are, the person that they bring as themselves to the role, not the tasks, not the position, but the person they are is such an insanely valuable asset to your business that losing the person they are would be something that would be a loss to you, even more so sometimes than the position. There is something to be said for those who bring an impact to the team. They can bring a culture to the team. They can bring a positivity, an energy, a problem solving skill set that maybe isn't a technical thing, but they've just got this personality and this value set with them as an individual that is just kind of irreplaceable. There is still value in that because here's the thing, many CEOs that look at their team will look at just what people can do. But I'm also saying here that we need to look at not just what your team can do, but also who they are. And even on our team, I have someone I'm thinking of in my head that there's been times where like she even has acknowledged that she was not like the best at the thing that she did. But we said to her, like, we will literally have you around in like some shape, form, capacity in these different buckets because like just of who you are, like the energy that you bring to the team is indescribable in the sense of the impact and the lightness and the just like the energy and the goodness and the positivity that she brings to everybody that she surrounds. Like, it is just, you cannot replace it. So is she the top tier of specifically the area that she's in? No, and she knows that. But she's also recognized the other areas that she brings value to the team. And so what we want to ask ourselves is this person bringing good team camaraderie? Are they somebody who maybe, even if their productivity or even if their position isn't as high level as we might expect it to be, are there softer qualities that will have this person being a asset to our team long term? And that's, again, just something you want to be asking yourself before you ever think about going into letting somebody go or removing them from your team. Now, here comes the hard question: your training and your support and the structure that you provided for them to succeed. Ask yourself, was this person, and be honest, you know, and this is a conversation between you and you right now, did the person that you hired actually, were they given the true resources, training, and the guidance they needed to be successful, to really succeed? And also asking yourself, did you throw this person into a role without any proper training or onboarding, and then ask them to really excel in this role that they had? And again, this is not me placing blame. This is not me trying to make you feel guilty. It's not me trying to make you feel any way. I'm trying to, if anything, show you the opportunity. If this person's got a great personality and brings a lot of energy and good team camaraderie to the team, but they happen to be falling a little short when it comes to their role, think about how valuable it might be to keep them on the team and allow them, with proper training and documentation, to advance in their skill set, to have both of those things be able to make them a top A team player. Did you take the time to equip them with the tools that they need? Did you actually give them true mentorship, i.e., helping them each part of the way and helping them to learn and develop? Did you set clear expectations? Did you provide ongoing support to them? Did you do the sink or swim approach, where you throw them in the deep end, you kind of expect them to swim? Was the failure of anything that they did potentially connected in some way, shape, or form to lack of proper support and documentation and training from you? Is there a sliver of possibility that it's from that? Now, you might say, Kate, no, there's not. I had tons of training. I had tons of onboarding. I had lots of structures, resources, videos, all these things that they could watch about their role. Okay, great. Well, then maybe you actually did have adequate training. Again, this is not to say that the person you're thinking about letting go, or the person that you're having issues with, is in fact not someone who's causing issues. They may still be actually making issues in the team, but we just have to ask the hard questions before we figure out what we want to do next. We then want to ask ourselves, which is step 5, the feedback. And we want to, again, look at the consistency and the schedule and the cadence of how often we gave them feedback. And then we want to look at what was the structure of that feedback and how did we do it in such a way that allowed them to get it in a timely manner, but also in an effective, helpful, and supportive manner as well. Regular feedback is essential for any single team member that you have to be able to consistently grow and progress and develop within your team. If it is rare, or if it is inconsistent, or frankly, if the feedback is not timely and it's too late, it ends up really being a disservice to a team member, and it ends up being something that hinders their ability to support you in the business and ultimately to grow within their role. And so if we want to give feedback, we need people to be able to be clear about what needs to change and why does it need to change. Like, I want to say, for example, okay, so we, for example, were working with somebody in our business and she was fantastic. She was fantastic. There was a part that we were giving her on feedback and it came around the topic of design. So we had given her design feedback and we had said, hey, when it comes to some of the things we're creating, we want to make sure there's a real emphasis on what's considered the punch word or the punch phrase that we look at in the design. And we had to explain to her that when someone is skimming through social media and the wrong punch phrase is accentuated, it means they don't get the essence of the message we want them to get as they're scrolling. They might, if we accentuate because instead of 10 reasons why, right? If we accentuate the wrong words or phrase, people are not getting the emphasis of why they need to open that post or why they need to consume it. And what that does is if they don't consume the post, they don't nurture. And if they don't nurture, they don't convert. So what we did was we said, listen, it's not just like, oh, you're accentuating the wrong word. Like, no, it's that word. That's bad feedback. Okay. That's not supposed to be the word. This is the word. So can you please make it with this word? That's bad feedback or feedback that needs improvement. Okay. Good feedback or intentional feedback is to say, here's what you did. Here's what I would have loved to have it be instead. Here's why I would have loved to have it be that way. And most importantly for us, this is a really important thing for us to get nailed down and for us to see happen. Because if we don't see that happen, here's how that impacts the business and creates a domino effect in other areas. Does that make sense? And I would really help somebody to get educated on the feedback that I'm making and the domino effect it has on the business, both positively or negatively, i.e., when we master this, here's how it's going to help us. And if we don't master this, here's how it's going to hinder us. So we want to look at giving them context because people that get, again, feedback, but maybe not structured feedback, are often not getting an understanding of the context or the impact of their work. Again, both positive or negative. So what it means is when you give feedback, there's no depth to it. It's very surface level. And oftentimes, if I'm going to be honest, I see this as a number one mistake. People are giving situational feedback, not actual structure or system feedback. What I mean by this is you're giving some feedback about a client, for example. So say you have an agency and this person, you give them feedback on how to interface with your clients. It shouldn't be about client Tom. It shouldn't be about client Sarah. It should be about, in general, when clients come to us with a conflict like this, here's how we want to de-escalate it, or here's how we want to navigate it, or here's the steps we go through for any client complaint or inquiry. That's the training. It's not, okay, well, with Tom, here's what you want to say. It's not about that, because when you train on a situation, guess what? The next situation that comes, they don't have a structure or system from which to take the next step without you. So what ends up happening is you end up in this loop of giving the same feedback over and over and over and over. Why? Because the context you gave was not based on a structure, it was based on a situation. So what happens when the next situation comes up is they don't know what to do because they have no structure or system to look at to help to guide them. When you use the first instance of a situation happening and you give somebody a structure or system to operate from, that helps to be something for them to root into so that they know what to do with full confidence the next time as like their backbone that they're operating from. So we want to give feedback, but here's the thing with feedback. Step 6 is milestones. And milestones are important because when it comes to your feedback, the feedback you give cannot be to the person who feels like, I've been giving this person feedback for 3 years. We can't be giving someone feedback on and on and on and on and on, and it just kind of like never having a destination or a finish date or like an end time. And so instead, we want to say, okay, this is what I need to see happen. Okay. So I have a conversation about this is what I need to see happen. This is what success feels like. This is the goal we need to work for together. I want to see this happen in the next 3 months. So, what I'd like to do is meet every 2 weeks, and each 2 weeks or each month, whatever the cadence feels right for you, this is what we're going to evaluate. And what you will do is you will set milestones toward a goal. Because what happens oftentimes with team members is people have a really hardcore conversation. They're like, if it happens again, you're gone. Or like, if this happens again, you tell yourself, maybe you don't vocalize it to the team member, but you're like, if this happens again with this person, like, I'm done. What I would want to ensure is that you have milestones that actually help someone to have checkpoints along the way of feedback. So when someone is at a place where you're thinking about letting them go, you need to have ongoing milestones documented and you need to have things that you're looking to see them do in a certain timeline. Feedback or success of changing someone's training is not they used to do this, now they do this. Like they didn't do it this way, now they do it this way. What I'd like to see, let's just say if I go back to like a social media manager, they're trying to give feedback to a team member. They feel like they're having to fix every single post. Okay. You would say, listen, right now I'm fixing every single post. In the next 2 weeks with these changes, I don't want to be fixing any more than 3 posts a week, max. 2 weeks after that, I do not want to be fixing more than 1 post a week. Long term, I don't want to get looped into this for more than 2 posts a month. So I'm going to need to see progress over the next 90 days as we work together and I give you feedback and I'm happy to make any trainings or resources or anything that you need that will be supportive for you. But over these next milestones, I need to see progress in how much I, as a CEO, am needing to get involved. Does that make sense? Is there anything that I could create that would help you to be able to do that? By creating the milestones, what you're doing is you're having a shared agreement with the team member. You're having a, hey, we're both acknowledging that whatever's happening right now is not working. We make a plan of action together. We set out milestones of change we want to see happen, or like the milestones of development that we're going to be looking for. And then once we have those, we then say, okay, great, we're going to evaluate those. So, what are specific actions that someone should do for each of those milestones? What are specific improvements that you want to see that are assigned to you that that person is making change in an impactful way? You've set realistic, measurable, and intentional, timely goals. Like you've set indirectly what's considered to be a SMART goal. You've set milestones for achievement. And so if someone, lacks, for example, productivity or movement on something, you can have a way that is very easy for you to track how they're progressing. But progress is not, they used to not do well at it, they do well at it now. Progress is seeing the change incrementally over time of how their actions or behavior or perspective or productivity are shifting as a result of the training that you're giving them. That's what we want. But they used to be bad, now they're good is not training. That's just basically slapping a label on their behavior without really giving them increments on knowing how they can succeed. So, we also want to set a timeline. So, if after a set period, right? Like I'm not saying in today's episode that you are to just let any and everything go with a team member, okay? This is not just like people get to do whatever they want and it's only us that's the problem. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying if you've done everything, if you've got good onboarding, you set clear expectations, you thought as much about who they were as a person and their personality in the hire as much as you did their understanding of their position training, if you've been giving feedback, if you've been, establishing milestones that you need to see of development, if you've been basing the feedback on structures that you gave in documentation and training, if you have done all these things, the idea is not that you're doing this for 2 years. Okay? If you know that someone has had all those things and they're not working out, you set a timeline to say, "Hey, listen, I need to see this change in the next 30 days. If it's not going to change, we won't be able to move forward together." And sometimes if you've already done that, you may be at a place where you say, "Kate, everything you covered today, I feel better about my decision and I know for a fact that I've done all this stuff and it means I feel confident to take the step moving forward, i.e. to let them go." Then you should feel confident to do that because it means you've covered all your bases. You should feel confident to not continue with this person because it means that you've done everything in your power as a leader, as a CEO, as the head of a business to do what you could to see this person succeed. If they didn't succeed outside of those things, it may just not be a good fit. It may not be a good fit between you and them. It may not be a good fit for them to necessarily be inside your business, the skill sets that they have. You can also use this as a check-in to verify that you should be 1,000% within right to say, this is not working out and I'm not going to move forward, right? That's okay. And so the timeline for progress means you need to set a timeline of expectation of when you want to see this person, have change. Like, what is the expectation we have of seeing change within this individual and how they're operating? And if the change doesn't happen, what will happen after that? And so I want to kind of quickly summarize the steps here for you so that you have a snapshot of them. Again, something on your team not working out, team member not working out. Here's what I want you to do. Take massive responsibility as a leader and ask those reflective questions and run the mirror test on yourself. Second, I want you to pause. I want you to avoid being emotional because at the end of the day, your emotions cannot be the reason that this person gets let go. There has to be a basis or grounds for this person being removed from the business, not only for yourself and for them, but also for the greater team environment. 3, I want you to look beyond their role and position. Look at the person's overall value to the company in personality, as well as the values they bring to the team, not just the position that they fill. Fourth, I want you to evaluate your training and support that you've provided. Go back and look at your trainings. Are they up to date? Do you have trainings? Have you been helping them to have the resources they need to be successful? 5, reflect on the fact that you have given feedback, yes or no, Have you given consistent feedback? Yes or no? And have you given structured feedback, i.e., not situational, system-based feedback or structured-based feedback? 6 is to outline the milestones and next steps together. If we're going to see progress of this person with their role, what are the milestones that we're going to establish? And what are they expected to learn, do, or achieve by those milestones to help you to know that they are making progress to continue within your team? And most importantly, what is the deadline? What is the progress date? What is the date of achievement that we ultimately want to see to say this is the point where we make a decision? Because you don't necessarily, if you feel like someone's not working out, need to drag it on by any means for, say, I don't know, 6 months, a year and a half, right? Like, this is not about hanging on forever. It's about ensuring that when we run a team, one of the best quotes I ever heard was like, your team does not work for you, you work for your team. Because your team being happy and supported and acknowledged and developed underneath you is the reason your business will be successful. So the first thought when something isn't working with your team cannot be like, oh, well, like this happened, so I'm going to let them go. The amount of people that get rid of team members or people on their team without a second thought to the impact that that has on the rest of the team culture, that that has on the business, that that has on the individual is mind-boggling. And the craziest part is, in 70% of the businesses that I go into, the main reason people are being let go is actually due to a lack of something on the CEO or the company's behalf. Because when I end up going in and auditing it, sometimes I get in there after someone's been let go, so there's nothing I can do about it. But my goal is to go in when I see the opportunity for development and say, listen, you may feel like you need to get rid of this person, but that person, to me, we can't even fairly assess them because we don't have any of the things we need to have as grounds to let that person go, for us to even know if they're really not working, because they don't have any of the things that they need from you, the feedback, the milestones, the documentation, the trainings. They don't have any of those. So without it, we have no basis to know if this person should be let go or not. So the intention today was really, I'm going to be honest, to give you the conversation that I give with my clients. And it's not always a fun one because we have to look at ourselves, hence the mirror test. We have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, are we part of the problem? Is there ways that I can be better to have a better team? And again, we started today's episode with the quote of, your business is never going to surpass the lid of its leadership, meaning that you are the lid of your company. So the invitation today is to acknowledge your role and recognize that if you want your team to be better, you have to be better. If you want your team to be better, your documentation has to be better. If you want your team to be better, your feedback has to be better. If you want your team to be better, your training and onboarding needs to be better. If you want your team to be better, you have to operate differently and not fire someone at the first sign that something's not working out without asking yourself these tough questions and running through this process every single time. So use this as a guide for yourself, that when something is not working with the team member, you can come back to this episode. You can save it, download it, flag it for yourself so that you have questions to ask yourself when it comes to understanding, okay, do I feel like this is the right move, or do I have some tough analysis and reflection that I need to be doing? So, all of that to say, my friends, if you have questions about team, by the way, and you would love some more team episodes, just shoot me a message on Instagram. I always love knowing what's kind of coming up in your business. What are you experiencing right now? What are you navigating as a leader? Maybe it's, something around leadership and being the CEO. Maybe it is about your marketing or your sales. What is coming up for you? And I would just love to have you reach out to me in the DMs and literally say, hey, Kate, it would be really helpful for me to have an episode that talks about ABC. And I also want to invite you on kateperkovic.com. You will literally see our podcast link. It is literally a place there for you to submit questions. So if you have a question that you want to submit to myself to have featured on the show, either anonymously or if you want to have it with your name, either or, you can submit your questions through kateperkovic.com/podcast. And if you go to that URL, you'll also be able to apply to be a guest or submit your questions that you'd like to have featured on the show. So all of that to say, my friends, thank you so much for listening. Today was an episode that I think was really needed as business owners, and that I hope that you take very seriously when it comes to your team, because as you scale and grow, your team is going to be the bread and butter of how you create all the impact that you do. And so this is why conversations like today are very, very important. So I will see you on next week's episode. And until then, as always, stay ambitious.